Underrated is the key word. Clark Lee is elite, and Vanderbilt will prove that they can win in 2025.
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast. Happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to the everydayers. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $100 or $150 rather, in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So, J.D. Thompson leads the Vandyboys into the desert for a 3-game MLB Desert Invitational. What's going to define success beyond just winning all 3 games? So how do we look at that? Basketball is looking for the season sweep on versus the Vols. They have to do it on the road. Can they shake those road woes? Can they come through at Thompson Bowling Arena? We're going to answer that. However, as we move towards the 2025 season, Clark Lee is still being underrated amongst his peers. He still must prove 2024 was no fluke. He will prove that Vandy can win in 2025. But how's he going to do it? Okay, so here's the thing. Here's what we gotta. Here's how we got to unravel this. All right, we got as we unpack. We've got to work backwards in our thinking before we can zoom forward, and before I can tell you, just like in the title, how he's elite now, how they prove they can win in 2025. So this is how we got here. Okay, Clark Lee came to Vandy. It was a mess. It was absolute dumpster fire, tire fire, however you want to describe it. Okay. Then, he takes over. He has a pretty good year 2, 5-7, beats Will Levis, the pride of the Tennessee Titans, and beats Florida and as his major conference wins 5 games this close on the cusp of a bowl game. Then 2023 happens, year 3, and it is abysmal. 2-10. And a bad 2-10 at that, getting shredded on the road against UNLV. Never a great look. But I think that was probably exactly what he needed. Okay. And you're probably scratching your head like, why is that what he needed? Like 2-10 is awful. Nobody should ever have to go through that. But I think that really kind of woke him up because I think, he saw at some of the stops that he's been, I think he's seen that CEO approach and saw that, hey, I can, you saw Brian Kelly do it at Notre Dame. I'm sure whoever he was with, I think he was with Rick Neuheisel at UCLA, when he was at, Syracuse, all these places, probably somewhere along the lines, he decided that he wanted to be kind of that overseer, CEO type head coach. And honestly, that's not his style. And I think he kind of learned that because when he felt very detached the first 3 years of the program. I think he kind of came back in year 2 and then redetached. And I think he trusted some of his coordinators probably a little too much. And that's kind of what led to, he lost grip on the program. And so as he was trying to decide all of that, he's like, okay, I've got to get a grip on this program. I've got to make some decisions. And then, look through the catalog of all my shows, and I break down the whole timeline between 23 and 24. So I'm not going to rehash all that. But to summarize it, he learned a ton from that last moment when he walked off the field in Neyland Stadium to where we sit right now. And he's hired all the right people around him, which that takes phenomenal leadership to do, to recognize that you have a problem and you can't accomplish this thing yourself. He hired all the right people, got all the right people within the program, all the right players. I think he found the right nucleus of guys, got rid of some got rid of themselves. However it happened, the bad nucleus that was on the team in 23 left, and it was a mass exodus. And that ended up being the right solution. He gets a great training program in, gets great support staff, builds his scouting department, invests like a real SEC team. Now they're starting with NIL. This thing, this thing is building and trending in the right direction. Okay. So this is kind of what he had a quote about that. He said, we have to realize the success that we want, which is not just a replication of the season, but to reach for more. It is not guaranteed. We're as close to slipping backwards as we are to reaching forward. So for my seat, it becomes, how are you driving, inspiring, pushing to ensure that everyone stays engaged to this idea of progress? And I'm not saying like there was no progress before, but I think that for Vanderbilt and this football program, I don't think they intentionally ignored progress. I don't think they intentionally sat back and said, okay, we were successful in year 2 and then year 3 happened. Like, I don't think I think he thought he was building and he thought he was doing what he needed to do as the CEO of the program. But I think he had become so far removed and so far detached that I'm not sure that he really had a good idea of what was happening in his locker room. I don't think he had a really good idea that his strength and training program wasn't great and it wasn't right for what his group needed. I don't think that he realized that, hey, these other places have these enormous support staffs, recruiting staffs and stuff. We don't have that here. We've got to invest in that. And I think when he finally realized that, hey, we have a successful season, 7-6 bowl game, which, a lot of teams don't love going 7-6, but right now for where we're at, it's jumping for joy. So the reason I'm talking about all this is because this list came out right here. That SEC podcast came out with a list. Okay. And Kirby Smart being number 1, I think nobody's surprised there. Lane Kiffin 2, Sarkisian 3, and then you can read the kind of the rest of the list. So here's my 2 guiding questions, and you guys can leave this in the comments. Is Clark Lea rated too low? Who's over and underrated on this list? I think Clark Lea's way too low. I think Sam Pittman, Mark Stoops, Brent Venables, and Hugh Freeze all should be underneath Clark Lea at the most. So I think Clark Lea should be sitting at 11 at the absolute worst. With the way Billy Napier ended the season, I don't know that you should move him. Mike Elko is pretty solid. I think Shane Beamer should be above. Well, I don't know if he should be above Kalen DeBoer because he lost head-to-head. So I think this list is pretty solid, 1 through 10. But I think Clark Lea is the top of that next group, and I think that's kind of where he fits. I think, as according to this list, I think Hugh Freeze is overrated. I think Brent Venables is overrated, even at 12. I don't love Brian Kelly at 5. I get it. I don't love it, but this is it's not a terrible list. I'll say that. I really like Mike Elko, but I think I'd put Billy Napier. I think I would flip those 2 and put Mike Elko at 10. I just don't think I think what Billy Napier was able to do and turn that program around, despite the records. I think it was pretty remarkable what he was able to do with his job. I mean, his head was on the chopping block, and they were raising the axe, and he got out of it, right? And so this is, I think Clark Lea is way too low. No respect whatsoever for what he was able to do. I guess it's because people don't believe that. I think people believe that it is a fluke and it is a one and done type situation, and Clark Lea will never be able to replicate that again because he's Clark Lea and he's super vanilla and all that stuff. He's not a great head coach, and he just doesn't have the capability of leading. And the only reason he's successful is because of Jerry Kill and all that stuff. But he hired Jerry Kill. He took Jerry Kill's advice. He mentored. He understood what his deficiencies were, and I think he fixed a lot of it. He's showing more personality. He's a little bit more aggressive. You can tell he's completely engaged. So I don't think this is a fluke. This is going to be, Clark Lea has learned to be, I think this was a learned behavior. I think he's always been an elite coach as far as defensive principles, as far as fundamentals, techniques, and, all the schematic stuff that goes with being a coach, and designing scheme and coaching within the scheme and understanding what other teams want to do. I think most of the things involved with coaching Clark Lee is actually elite because he's highly intelligent and he understands the game of football and he understands other people and psychology and what people want to try to accomplish against Vandy and how people are going to attack Vandy. The things he's had to learn is, hey, I gotta drive this ship, this giant cruise ship that's hard to steer. And that's learned behavior. That's hard for anybody. Everybody in their right mind has struggled as a head coach. And some people have had better situations and shorter learning curves because of the situations they're in. However, I think Clark Lee is going to prove why he's an elite coach. And I think the rest of his deficiencies are going to catch up with the things that he's extremely good at. And I think you're going to see a way different Clark Lee. And that's going to be really good for Vanderbilt. Now, they can prove they can win in 2025. They play a brutal schedule. So, like, winning just because of the other factors involved outside of their control are happening. So I don't know if winning is completely realistic, but like you're going to see a remarkably better team, a team that lasts longer throughout the season, a team that doesn't have that Georgia State game from a year ago, whereas you're just like scratching your head, you know? So I think that all that involved, the learning experiences he's done, the elite traits that he had coming in, the journey that he's taken, I think has led him to this point, and the reason why this show is titled the way it's titled. So, like I said, 15 is criminally low for him, but I think he's right around. I think he's on the cusp of being a top 10 coach in this conference. One more year, I think he kind of breaks in. You're going to see a lot of movement within this list, and we'll kind of, I'll look at more of the coaches that are on Vandy's schedule. Here's the list one more time, if you want to screenshot that. But this, not many people, below where he should be are on their schedule. They play the only team that's in the bottom 6 of the coachings that's on Vandy's schedule is Mark Stoops. Well, really Hugh Freeze too. So there's 2. Hugh Freeze right now is currently at 11. Should be, everything should just kind of bump down. I think Sam Pittman should be right above Lebby. And a lot of that's health issues, and that's affecting his ability to coach. But anyway, basketball is invading Thompson Bowling Arena. Can they take down the Vols? Can they sweep the Vols? We'll talk about that next. All right, talking about Factor. Yeah, Factor. Here we go. Looking to optimize your nutrition? Yeah, your New Year's resolutions are still happening. Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. I think that's what you're going to call Vandy's offense on Saturday in Thompson Bowling Arena, the heat and eat. So with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences every week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle, whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. So I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. I mean, it's brutal, man. I tried their Protein Plus meals. They were packed with flavor, kept me full throughout the day. And that's important for me because I teach, I'm on my feet, I'm moving all day. So, man, I am as hungry as they get, man. I'm going to the convenience store. I'm buying a bag of chips, no more, right? The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. So eat smart with Factor and get started at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege. 50 off and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE50 off, and that's 50 with 50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 off to get 50% off free shipping on your first box. Factor Meals, you won't be sorry. All right, thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen each and every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Shout out to you everydayers. Thank you for making this show what it is. I certainly appreciate how you guys rock and roll, man. You guys are with me. Let's keep growing this thing, man. This is going to be incredible. So the Doors invade Thompson Bowling Arena. They kick it off with Tennessee, looking for that season sweep. So what's got to happen on the road, right? And you have to look at it kind of like I think when you look at this matchup, okay, and I had to think about this for a second because like here how do we attack this thing, okay? The first thing you have to look at is the deficiencies, okay? And I think before you look at any sort of matchups, any sort of like who do we have to defend, who are the guys that can give us fits? I think you have to look inward, okay? And John Wooden was the master at this of like, hey, let's worry about us, not worry about them, and everything else to take care of itself. Like that's kind of where he's at on that. So with this whole thing, I think you have to look at it this way, okay? You have to say, what do we need the most? And to me, it's the road environment. And that's been the biggest thing with this Vandy team is that you get on the road, and the road in the SEC is insane. Like it is so difficult to play on the road in this conference that it can be a factor. Like that's the psychology of that alone can be a detrimental factor. So you have to kind of manage that environment. You have to kind of manage your mindset within that environment, and you have to play within yourself and say, you know what? We're gonna like the horse with the blinders. We're gonna block out all of that, and we're gonna play our game. And that's kind of the thing you have to do. And here's kind of my 3 keys for that. That's number 1, actually, manage the road environment, win the mental battle, because so many times, and they did this at home against Auburn. So it's not necessarily exclusive to the road. I think this sort of like, I think this also comes with being a new group because, like I've said, just about every time I talk about basketball, this team just met each other on the court in June, and they had no prior experience playing together as a team. They all came from separate places. So, I think some of that comes out in some of these really hostile, tough situations. And against Auburn at home, even though it was at home, and it wasn't comfortable because Auburn is like they swarm the hell out of you. So there's a mental battle of like when teams panic, I think they feel like they have to shoot. They have to score every time they touch the ball. They have to score threes, and they have to do all of these things all at once. And really what it comes down to is you just have to settle down and play your game. And then what ended up happening is after they spotted Auburn 15 points, they started playing their game, and they won, or they got ahead. They didn't win, but they showed, hey, if we play our identity, we can actually be a viable team, and they proved that. And so now they have to do it on the road. They did it a little bit against Florida, and a lot of their road games this year. It's been like, okay, they deliver the first punch, so they prove their toughness, their grittiness, and all that stuff, and they showed, hey, we're Vanderbilt. We're here. This is no. We're gonna take this game. And then the other team counterpunches, and that's when they panic. Like because these teams at home, their counterpunch is so strong that it stuns you. And Vandy's not. This is not a exclusively Vandy problem either. Like a lot of teams do this in this conference. They get hit and they just don't know what to do. They don't know how to react. And so you get in a situation to where now you're out of your game because the other team has just kind of counterpunched you, and you feel like, okay, in order to get back on track, we're going to have to get all this back at one time. And you get out of your identity, and you start kind of playing uncharacteristically. You start turning the ball over, taking bad shots, rushing shots, things like that. So that brings me to my next point. If you can settle down, start strong, play to your identity. And Vandy's identity is get to the rim and take the threes as they come, as they present themselves. And too many times when they get in trouble, they try to present the threes themselves, but they just can't help it. And so they gotta do that. They gotta get to the rim. That's number 1. Get to the rim, play the threes as they come, and let's get down to it. And then also defend the arc. Like you have to defend the arc. You can't just pack in it. You can't pack into the paint and say, okay, come to the rim. And your lack of size causes you to play that way sometimes, causes you to feel like you have to play that way sometimes. But defend the arc and play well in the paint. Trust your guys. Trust McLaughlin. trust Jalen Carey and trust the other big guys, or big guys, like air quotes, and play well in the paint. Defend the space, close down the space, make them hit a contested three if they're going to take a three. Make them disrupt their rhythm. Because when they don't do that, the other team, Auburn, Florida, especially teams like that, they start hitting from behind the arc, and then you really can't stop them when they get hot from behind the arc. And the next thing you know, a 2-point lead turns into a 12-point deficit, just like that, because you didn't close out a couple of times in the arc, and then they got hot. And it was like NBA Jam where you can't miss, right? And so if you can do that, I think you have a chance. Now, Tennessee's pretty damn good. They are a really good team, and they present a lot of problems. But if you can take care of your own issues, if you can get out of your own way, you will have a chance. If you can make it to where you have, worrying about Chaz Lanier, worrying about Tyler Birmingham, worried about, what Rick Barnes is doing, Zakai Ziegler, and, like I said, Chaz Lanier, and you worry about matchups. If you can get to the point to where you can worry about matchups, then you're in a great place because everything else is taken care of. So you have to manage your own mental state. You have to manage your own mental expectations at the start of the game. Settle in, play your basketball. Your basketball was good enough to beat Tennessee the first time around. It was. It absolutely was good enough to beat Tennessee. Remember that, and then go do it again. Watch the film. It's successful. Go do it again. All right, manage that. And then, try your best to limit Chaz Lanier and those guys, and just play your game. Zakai Ziegler, just play your game. Frustrate them. Force them to hit clutch contested shots. Make it tough on them to get to the rim. Make them make free throws. Clog passing lanes. Do what you do defensively. It's what you did the first time. You created a bunch of turnovers, and you caused Tennessee to play the panic game. Right? Tennessee was the panic game, and you caused that. So just do that again. Just do that again, and everything will be fine. Win or lose, you just got to get used to it. You got to, you're going to have to play in some of those environments, and that's going to be intriguing, so to speak. So I'm expecting a close game, and with this being a road game, this is going to be tough. Alex Hemingway might actually dress out. He's closer to playing. They could use his 3-point shooting as well. But anyway, nonetheless, Tennessee, this is going to be a well-fought game. This is an intense rivalry. Vandy's very scrappy, and they got a chip on the shoulder, and they're looking for a sweep. Do they get it? Yeah, maybe. It'd be interesting, but they're going to have to manage they're going to have to manage the road environment. They're going to have to play well on the road consistently. Anyway, speaking of on the road, the baseball team is flying out to Phoenix. They're playing in the MLB Desert Invitational. So that's going to be a lot of fun, but they kick off the season in a tournament on MLB Network. So we'll talk about that next. All right, but first we're going to talk about FanDuel, because when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. So I love using the live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, because NBA games don't really start until after halftime anyway. So if I'm backing the Hawks for a late game rally, or maybe I'm going Ant-Man to hit a clutch 3 towards the end of the game for the Timberwolves, I never feel like I've missed my chance. And the app is so easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, wrapping up the show here on the Locked On Vandy podcast on this Valentine's Day edition of the Locked On Vandy podcast. So as you're listening to this on your way to your Valentine's Day date, make sure you give us a like, subscribe if you haven't already for those notifications, follow at Locked On Vandy on all social media platforms. So the baseball team, the Vandyboys, yeah, they're heading out to the desert. They're taking on they're taking on a bunch of teams, but they are in the MLB Desert Invitational. Here is what we got on tap. That's Jonathan Vastine returned. More on that, but Grand Canyon, they're playing at GCU Ballpark on the MLB Network later on. Then they're versus Nebraska on Saturday, Salt River Fields, also televised on MLB Network, and versus UC Irvine on Sunday at Sloan Park. That'll be webcast on MLB.com. So very, very good slate of games. The rotation is set for this matchup. I'm gonna leave that up for just a couple more seconds. And this, again, what I really like about this team is that you've got kind of a new mindset. Well, the same leadership at the top, but I think it's kind of evolved a little bit. And I think you've got some you've got some fresh people in from the portal. You've got some new coaches in, and you're breaking in a whole new starting rotation. And when I say starting rotation, I mean weekend starting rotation. You've got J.D. Thompson, who did not start last season in the weekend rotation, but worked his way to the Sunday slot. His stuff just got more electric as the season went on, and he just kind of earned his way into that spot. He's going to kick things off on Friday. He's likely going to be the starter and saying, okay, well, every Friday we're just going to try to guarantee that we win game one, right? Then McIlvain is the Saturday starter. He's kind of your swing guy. He can put you in sweep territory, or he can prevent you from becoming sweep territory, depending on how Friday goes. But he's just banged up. He was banged up last season. He's got a little bit of rust, but again, he's a left-hander that has dynamic stuff, and really is an electric pitcher. If once he kind of knocks off the rest, so we'll kind of see where he goes there. And Bowker or Bowker, I say Bowker, you say Bowker, you say tomato, I say tomato. All right. But he's going on Sunday. They're thinking he's got ace potential. He had that at Georgetown last year, so they're thinking ace potential there. And so he'll round out the list. So you have Thompson versus Grand Canyon, McIlvain versus Nebraska, and Bowker versus UC Irvine. So that's going to be very interesting for that. So really, what are the expectations though? Like, how do we define success? I said that at the top of the show. Obviously, winning all three games is a success. Like, let's just throw that off the table, because we know that. Like, that's not okay. Win all three games. Okay, yeah, great analysis. But how do we define success? Okay, well, here's how we define success. You get McIlvain 6 innings of great pitching, 6 innings, low output from the other team, and he just gets people out. Okay, I think you see all three pitchers pitch into the game, and they still have their dynamic stuff from inning 1 to inning 6 or 7. Okay, hitting, I think from the middle of the lineup, you need to start seeing that power, and you need to see it early. Like, I think you need to see people drive the ball and drive it out of the park. And that's something that they severely lacked last year. So I think we can consider, despite the record, whatever the record is, throw that out. That doesn't matter. Obviously the goal is to win all 3 games, but if you don't, I think you need to see your pitcher have quality starts. I think you need to find pop in the middle of the lineup, guys that hey, it's ninth inning, ninth inning, middle lineup comes up, and there's about to be some runs scored. Like, that's the kind of confidence you need. They have a couple guys that can do it. They just now got to do it. I think also Vastine, I think, has got to have a more consistent go at it. I think he's got to be somebody that drives the ball and is just an absolute pest on the base paths. And he's got to be the Gold Glover out there. He's got to prove. I think he's got to start to prove that he's the first, second rounder in the MLB draft. And I think that leadership will come with that. And so if you see him do well and defensively, not a lot of errors, I think you can say, okay, that was a successful first weekend of baseball. Now, there's obviously going to be, the sport of baseball just lends itself to this, but there's obviously going to be some mistakes. There's going to be some things. It's just the nature of the sport of baseball. But I think just in the grand scheme of things, if you can get your pitchers with quality starts, not giving up too many runs, and you get some pop in your lineup and you get guys driving the baseball somewhere and putting runs across the plate, I don't think you can complain too much. And I think you can consider the first weekend a success. And the national exposure on the MLB Network is never a bad thing. And you got, professional scout eyes on you, probably a little bit more intense. And then, like, to say, hey, we got invited by the MLB to play in this tournament. Like, this is what you come to Vandy for. Like, that could be a good recruiting tool. So anyway, but that's all I got. And if you're heading out to Phoenix, or you're heading out to a Thompson Bowling Arena this weekend, be careful. And when you head out on your dates tonight, have fun, enjoy your significant other. And we'll see you back here next time on the Locked On Vandy podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here next time. Anchor down. Peace out. Behave yourselves.